All right, happening right now, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and Newark Mayor Ras Baraka are announcing the results of lead filter testing after what many have feared might be a crisis in the city. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Infrastructure. In order to fully understand the totality of the problem, the federal EPA, state DEP, and the city of Newark, working in partnership, conducted over 300 testing in over 300 homes. And about 1,700, this is approximately 1,700 samples were taken from those over 300 homes. The preliminary overall results show that approximately 97% of water filters currently in place are effective the moment the tap is opened. And that number improves to approximately 99% when water flushes the service line for at least 5 minutes before use. Again, approximately 97% effective immediately, and 99% with 5 minutes of flushing. These results are a welcome jolt of positive news that allows us collectively to charge ahead in implementing our short, medium, and long-term solutions. This comprehensive set of solutions will ensure Newarkers have the best possible access to clean, safe drinking water in the days ahead, the months ahead, and most importantly, for generations to come. These actions can serve as not only a statewide model, but perhaps a national model. In the short term, bottled water will continue to be available to residents in the impacted area. In addition, we will continue to work in partnership with the city, including new funding for a community assistance program to recruit, train, and mobilize a volunteer force to install filters, educate residents on filter use, and as needed, collect water samples to enhance confidence in the reliability of Newark's tap water. In the medium term, the orthophosphate being added to the water. Remember, this is a solution that began going through the water in May. The orthophosphate being added to the water to protect against lead leaching will begin to take effect throughout the service area and will add extra protection while the expedited effort to replace the lead service lines aggressively continues. And in the long term, Mayor Ras Baraka, with our support and that of the county executive, has led the way and committed to replacing every single lead service line. Make no mistake that this is the only surefire, long-term fix for clean and safe drinking water. Already, Mayor, I believe roughly 6,500 households have signed up for water line replacement, and more than 900 lines have been replaced. And I thank the many city and county workers and volunteers and concerned residents coming together around the need to sign everyone up. If you have yet to sign up, please visit newarkleadserviceline.com/register. Again, that's newarkleadserviceline.com/register. And we must also acknowledge the ongoing efforts of our federal delegation in meeting this long-term solution, especially Senator Cory Booker. It bears repeating, aging water infrastructure is not merely a Newark problem. It is a state and national problem. It is a problem that demands broad leadership. Knowing that the household filters are proving up to approximately 99% effective is both a measure of relief and of confidence in our plan of action. But no one here, for a moment, is going to sit down when there's still much work to do. And we will not stop until we have 100% of the job done. Again, I want to give a big shout out to the mayor and his leadership and the county executive and his leadership. Amen. And with that, it is my pleasure to ask my colleague in government to come up and say a few words, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I certainly affirm all of the information and the factual data that the governor has just placed on the record. But I also want to lend my voice to the mayor of this city, to the municipal council, to the department and division directors, and most importantly, the residents of the city of Newark. As both the lieutenant governor and the commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, I want to assure everyone in Newark that my department and other state agencies are all hands on deck to address the issues that the residents and the people of Newark are confronting. You can be assured that the mayor has complete access to my department. We do a variety of different things to support municipalities, and you can be assured that we will maximize the assets and the resources that we have within the Department of Community Affairs to assist in the efforts of both the city and our Department of Environmental Protection.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Again, I want to give a huge shout out to his leadership. It's my honor to introduce the Mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank the governor and his leadership in this process, all the way from the beginning to the end. We've always had the same plan. The plan is never altered. Filters, orthophosphate, changing the lead service lines. That has always been our plan. It is our plan now, and we won't rest until all of every lead service line in the city is completely replaced. I want to thank the Essex County Executive, Joe DiVincenzo, who, with the innovative and collaborative effort to help us get the $120 million and the work that he's done at the county to get the AAA rating that would allow us to do that. You know, and the folks here at Newark's fiscal department, the budget and finance office here, and all of the folks who worked to make sure that we were in a position to borrow money, that we actually purchased some of our old buildings back from the county, that we were strong enough to borrow money to be able to get into this position. It sounds like an easy fix, but it wasn't easy. I'd like to thank the Lieutenant Governor, as she mentioned, the DCA, local finance board, and the folks that work there for helping us muscle through this and get to a finish line of getting $120 million that we may be able to do this. Also like to thank the volunteers who came out and who are out there still at every rec center, who are going door to door and have been, who are getting lead service line forms filled out, who are delivering water, who have to deal with not just people on the street with misinformation, but people with cameras in their face and who are not prepared and didn't sign up for that. Just want to thank you for being out there, and you know, the residents, thank you, and I never got opportunities to thank you, so hopefully this is my chance to say thank you to you for the work that you've done in this city. And we're going to need your help some more. That's, well, you know, I need to make it important to thank you. I want to thank Kareem, obviously, for stepping up to the plate and taking the slings and arrows and the blows that he's taken and will continue to take, by the way, for being a part of this process and making sure that we are where we are. Listen, we tested a small number of filters out of 39,000. We made a decision to make that information public, to tell people about it, to go forward with it. We did that, and as a result of that, we, you know, got hit pretty hard. And even if I knew ahead of time that we would get hit that hard again, if I thought the criticism was right or unfair or just or unjust, I would do it again. I think that we acted in the overabundance of caution. And we gave out water, and the image of us giving out water sent to everyone seemed like Newark was not in control of the problem, that it was being mismanaged or mishandled. The whole concept of expired water, which we all know that there's no such thing as water being expired. Everyone ran with it, and we took it as far as we could go And we took all of those blows. And we hated giving out water, and we still hate the idea that we have to give out water, but we must do that until we figured out if those filters actually worked. So I am happy, not only for the hundreds of thousands of residents of the city, or the 18,000 homes that are affected, or the 14,000 in the Pequannock that are affected by this. I'm happy because the filter that I use in my home may also be working. So it is good news that 97% of those filters work upon coming out of the tap, no matter what, and 99% if you flush the water. Something Kareem Adeem has been telling us to do, by the way, for months. For months, been telling us to flush the water first before you use the filter. So I appreciate that, and I want to say that, again, echoing what the governor said, that this is not just an urban problem, not just a Newark problem. It's a problem of the state. It's a problem of the country, and I'm glad that we are taking the problem head on. I would like to, in closing, remind people that the end of this is not near. We have still much work to do. We won't be satisfied until every lead service line is replaced in this city. We are grateful that we went from a timeline of 8 years or more to a timeline of 24 to 30 months. We are already out in the street working very aggressively. They're already replacing lead service lines, as you know. Want to thank the federal delegation, Senator Booker, Senator Menendez, and all of the other folks that were involved in helping us get additional funding on the end of it that may help us as well around the close of this project. We are having a town hall October the 2nd. The state of the water, which is probably unprecedented. We're having that because we think it's necessary to talk about some of the things that our residents want to hear, and then give them a plan that we've always had, and kind of address some of the anxiety and fears that they may have because of all of this. So I want to say God is good. I want to be, and I can't leave without saying thank you to all my prayer warriors who I went to every open meeting and said, y'all better ask that God put his finger in those filters. So we thank God that the filters work, but we are not in any way having a victory lap, because this is not a victory for us. It is good news and a long and arduous task to make sure we have clean drinking water.
Thank you, Mayor, again for your leadership. Please help me welcome another big leader in this fight and in so many, County Executive Joe DiVincenzo.
Thank you, Governor. This has truly been, I have to tell you, a team effort. And Governor Murphy, I just want to thank you for your leadership and your team for doing an outstanding job and making sure your team is staying on this every day. And I know because I hear from them every day. Mayor Ras Baraka, has been working his tail off here, him and his staff, because he can't do it alone. And he deserves a lot of credit where we are at this particular time and where we're going down the future. And it's been a pleasure to work with him and his team, especially that young guy, Kareem, who was working very closely with my Director of Public Works, Sanjeev Vargas, who used to be his boss. But they developed a good relationship, and they know the most important thing is to make sure that everybody has safe water here. And we are one team here. The test results are the test results, and they're just numbers. We all know that's not the problem. And that's one of the reasons why we jumped in on the county level, because something needed to be done, because this problem is not only here in Newark, it was in Flint, it's all throughout the country. The pipes needed to be replaced. And that's the responsibility. The mayor knows that these results are good, but this is not where it's at. He wants to make sure, and I want to make sure, I know the governor wants to make sure that all 18,000 households' pipes are changed so they could have safe water. And I know we're working together. I know we have a short timetable. I want to thank the city, because the president, city council voted for this, the county voted for it, local government services voted for it, and now come November 1st, we'll have $120 million waiting for the mayor to making sure that we get this job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, again for your leadership. Last but not least, bless you, before we take a couple of questions, please help me welcome another warrior in this fight, and so many, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, Catherine McCabe.
Thank you, Governor. I will be the person with the practical tips for all of you out there who are concerned with the lead in your water. We are very happy to see the results of these filter tests. We feared the worst, and yet the ultimate test has shown us that the filters are functioning, and they're functioning reliably. So residents, you can have confidence in using the city's tap water if you flush and filter. If you have a lead service line, you should flush for 5 minutes when you wake up in the morning after the water has not been running at night, and if you're away from home during the day. Anytime the water has been sitting in the line for over 6 hours, flush first. Kareem was right about that. And then use your filter. If you have a large front yard that is longer than 75 feet, you might need to flush a little longer than 5 minutes. We recommend 8 minutes flushing, although the experts are working on getting you more technical advice about the length of time for particular yards. If you do not have a lead service line, you still may have lead solder in your plumbing if you live in an older home, so we still recommend that you flush for 1 or 2 minutes when you run the water first thing in the morning. When you use a filter, and we urge you all to use the filters, I hope you haven't thrown them away, but I understand the city has some more, so if you have, don't be shy about calling for a new filter. It is important that you use the city-issued filters because they are certified to remove lead. Not all filters do that. It is important that you replace the cartridges when the red light goes on. It won't stop the filter from working, but it will work more effectively if you make sure to replace the cartridge at that time. Also, when you replace the cartridges, please use the city's replacement cartridges. Again, you can count on them to be lead certified. And finally, do not run hot water through the filters. Again, this won't wreck the filter. It will still work quite effectively, but if you want to get that top percentage, then you should avoid running hot water through the filter, and needless to say, don't use it to wash the dishes. There is, of course, a very small remaining risk, 97, 99, those are approximate numbers because we're looking at the preliminary results of a study. And this study, I want to say that we came out early to tell you the results because we think it's so important that you hear it now before there's a study report that's quite ready to be issued. We know there has been a high level of anxiety among the people, and we know that it is a big burden to be carrying bottled water up and down the stairs for a family. And for the hardworking families of Newark, we have the good news here. To help even more, to follow these filter recommendations and to assist residents also in testing their water if they want to have assistance in that, the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, will work with the city to set up a community assistance program. We will be standing that up in the near future, and we call upon the volunteer organizations. I saw Kim Gaddy here. There you are, Kim, from Clean Water Action. Our first volunteer. Thank you, Kim. But we have had many organizations, of course, stand up here in Newark to assist the people when they needed it, and we invite you all to come and join us again as we renew our efforts to make sure that the residents have the proper information that they need to manage this problem themselves. As we know, there's no permanent solution. The corrosion control treatment, the second effort that the city is making, will be ready sometime probably next spring. That should be fully effective. But ultimately, while there's still lead in those lines, there's no guarantees unless we replace the lines. So I am incredibly grateful to the county executive and to the mayor for their very forward thinking in standing up this remarkable program to accelerate the replacement of all Newark's lead lines within the next few years. So thank you very much, and I will be happy to take your questions as well as the rest of our speakers.
Can I say, we're also changing Belleville's and Hillside's lead service lines that affect us too.
Excellent. I'm sure they're happy to hear that.
I can say I may be the least qualified person to answer your questions, but with that, we'll take your questions. Please.
Question. So my name is Jose Pellier from Univision News. So the way these tests are typically conducted, to test whether a filter is working effectively, you have to test the water that's coming out of a faucet, right, to see what the level of lead is there, and then test the level of lead in water coming out of the faucet. We heard about households, we heard about samples. There are two numbers that we're interested in. One is how many filters were tested in this test, and then the other is how many faucets had a higher than EPA level of lead, how many faucets tested higher than 15 parts per billion?
Either one of you guys?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Well, the details on those numbers, which I do not carry around in my head, will be available when the report comes out, which should be in the next couple of weeks. The roughly speaking, the number of filters that were tested was over 300, and the description that you were giving of the testing is a very rigorous sampling protocol that was developed by the combination of the city and its experts, the DEP, and the US EPA, so that we all agreed on what you need to do to have a reliable scientific study whose results we can depend on. The initial information that we got was alarming because it looked like 2 out of 3 filters weren't achieving that level, but now we have the statistics after doing all of this very rigorous testing and following those sampling protocols to know that it's not that.
These are all homes with lead service lines?
There were some homes in the sampling pool that were not lead service lines. The city, in doing its outreach, tried to target the ones that would have the worst case, so lead service lines, and also looking for the ones that had higher levels of lead reported in the past. But other residents, and we thank you for your cooperation, called in and volunteered to be a part of it. The scientists were happy to see that and happy to include them in the study, because what they were trying to do is to test the normal conditions that Newark's families are experiencing every day. And those, of course, vary from having a lead line to not having a lead line. So what they have done here is a really comprehensive study that can give us some assurance.
Thank you.
Governor,
Yes, sir.
what is the EPA? I assume this has been shared with the EPA. What feedback have they given you? And secondly, when you talk about it being a national problem or a state problem, what is the state proposing to do at this point for the Pattersons and Garfields and Hackensacks and Camdens, et cetera?
I'm going to ask Catherine or Kareem to come back up and answer the EPA question. She can intro the state risk role as well.
Yes, EPA has been part of this study with us. We've been working alongside them. There were EPA members of the sampling teams that went out. They were part of creating the sampling protocols. They also independently reviewed the quality assurance, quality control of the results to make sure that we all agree on the numbers. Because the report is still preliminary, those EPA, in its longstanding policy, is not yet comfortable making final statements about it. They will wait for the final report for that, but they were with us every step of the way. We worked in great collaboration.
So there's no feedback from them on these particular numbers yet?
They are aware of the numbers.
And Governor, about other communities?
I think we've said this before. This is, I mentioned it earlier, it's a statewide and in fact, a nationwide challenge in urban, rural, and suburban communities. Patterson and Trenton and Camden and other communities are on a rigorous protocol already. That gets reviewed regularly by the DEP and the EPA and those communities. There is a bill on the president's desk which passed both houses with big margins, and that would allow us to flip from clean water to drinking water funds, and those are monies that we will be able to deploy to some extent in Newark, but also to the extent in other communities around the state to help us get out ahead of this. Please, Brenda.
The individuals whose homes had the filters that didn't work, that small percentage, did you inform them of the fact that the filters didn't function? Did you urge them to stay on bottled water?
Kareem, do you want to come in?
First and foremost, I want to thank those 3 individual homes that signed up to allow us to test their homes for the next year. They didn't sign up for the media and everybody knocking on their door, but yes, they're still using bottled water. The city is still providing bottled water into our next round of sequential sampling at their homes as we monitor the orthophosphate.
So you told them?
We provided bottled water to them.
So are you telling people that they can stop using bottled water as long as they follow these protocols with the filters?
So we're telling you that the filters are working 97%. effectiveness. And if you flush the water, it's working 99%. Again, we gave out the water as a stream of precaution, while we had that limited data point where we tested 3 filters, and it looks like 2/3 of the filters fell. Now, as we got more results in, we know that that's not the issue, right? And as we continue forward with rolling out the community assistance program, we'll be dialing back on it.
So just to be clear, you are still giving out bottled water, or you are not? What is the...
So again, we didn't come here today to say we're going to stop giving out bottled water. It'd be very harsh to just cut it off as of today. As we continue to get the final report out, and the community assistance program rolled out, we'll start dialing back, and at a later time, we'll release the date when we'll stop bottled water.
Just to be clear, the 2 out of 3 tests of those filters, they were the same kind of filter as the 300 or so that were tested in the next round. That seems like such a really big different outcome. Do you understand even now why those was wrong with the 2 out of the 3? Was it, you must know something more about this filter now.
No, right now, we're still just going to be monitored to see why those 2 filters failed. But I do want to remind everyone that those filters were tested under an extreme condition, as a condition that we made for the pass fail.
Thanks, man. Please.
Question for Mayor Baraka. The last press conference announcing the $120 million loan program, you said that you're exploring bypassing public contracts to expedite the replacement of lead service lines. I wanted to see where you are in that process of exploring how to bypass public bidding.
We do an emergency contract. That's what the Star Ledger had put out. the New York Times had put out, and got it wrong a little bit. So emergency contract is something that we do to bypass the public bidding process so we can purchase things quicker. For example, when we found out we needed to use filters, if we went through the public bidding process, it would have took us at least 4 to 6 months to get the process done to be able to buy the filters. We sent a letter to Jerome Wakefield, who is our purchasing agent, to declare an emergency so that we can buy filters quicker. We're going to do that. We already did that for 2 companies that have already begun going in the ground. They went in the ground last Wednesday. They're doing 25 filters a day apiece. That's about 50 service lines a day. It's about 50 lead service lines a day. Will probably equal about 1,000 lead service lines a month. Very aggressive that we're trying to get them to do out of those 2 companies. And there was no public bidding process because we declared an emergency to do that.
Did you drink the filtered water from one of these affected homes?
I drink it now.
So who should be using bottled water? Is it vulnerable populations, children, pregnant women? Should they be using bottled water and not filtered water?
Well, if the filters work, everyone should be using they should use filtered water. We think that the filters are, if they're effective, then everybody can use them. It actually benefits us to get the problem solved quicker if people actually use the water with the filter on. It allows us to get the orthophosphate to move into the system quicker and begin to form a prophylactic around the pipe inside of it. When we give out bottled water, it actually discourages that process. So it makes sense once the filters work for us to use those filters. But we're not going to stop, as Kareem said, put our brakes on real fast of giving out water. We're going to continue to give out water, and we're going to, dial back gradually. Once we believe, one, that the orthophosphate is working to the extent that it is, and that people are clear on how to use those filters, I think the community assistance program is going to help us get information to folks on how to use the filters properly, how to install them properly, when to change the cartridges, and talk to them about why children have had high levels of lead in their blood in the first place, which generally comes from lead-based paint and lead dust that's being missed in all of this. So we want to make sure that our residents are also clear on that as well.
Mr. Mayor, so we don't know why, but can you just tell us a little bit more about why those 2 filters failed, what you were able to find about that, and also why you think the EPA would make this request for bottled water on such a small sample size?
Well, I'm not an engineer. Well, at least not that kind of an engineer. But I couldn't tell you why and I don't think at this point that there is any real evidence to the case. I think that they're going to work and study, and they've been doing that to figure that out. It's like you know, in my mind, you go to the pharmacy and you buy some Tylenol. In the back, it tells you if you take this Tylenol, it's probable, it's rare that you're going to get all of these things if you take the Tylenol. But when you get a headache, you don't throw the Tylenol in the garbage. You actually take one for your headache, hoping that you're not part of that rare group. So at the end of the day, people are studying that, and when they come up with it, prayerfully they'll let us know about it. But we know that an overabundance of the filters are working, and we're urging our residents to use them.
And on the EPA, there's just the second part. Why do you think the EPA would have made this request for bottled water on such a small scale?
I can't speak for the EPA. I think they were, as we were, wanted to have an overabundance of caution. When you test 3 filters and 2 of them appear that way, you have to take the evidence on its face. So on its face, it feels like 2 out of 3 filters do not work based on that test group. So in order to get more information, you have to have a larger and wider testing pool so you can have a definitive and scientific result.
Why are you talking about the Belleville thing? The Belleville, sorry.
Oh, yeah, the county executive, he's right. So we're changing lead service lines in Belleville and Hillside to the customers that receive water from the city of Newark. So there are people in that city who have lead service lines that do not, receive our water, and we're not changing theirs.
Well said. I'm going to take 1 or 2 more. Mark.
Governor Murphy, here in the city of Newark, many people have had a high degree of distrust, discontent, confusion about the governmental response to this problem so far.
Bless you.
Regarding this community action program, how do you think, we're talking about test levels and science and numbers, how do you think on a more visceral level you restore people's trust? And Mayor Baraka can answer this too.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. Let me say 2 things that are not in answer to your question. Sheila reminds me the question about contracting in the emergency protocols are very analogous to what was done in Superstorm Sandy. So there's precedent for this. Secondly, I have to say the relationship with the EPA over the past number of weeks has been a constructive one, and I would be remiss in not saying that. Listen, I think there's sort of 2 ways. If you're dealt a bad hand, and by the way, over 100-year-old lead service lines is a bad hand, and it's a hand that's been dealt not just to Newark. So the question is, when you get a couple of data points and emphasis on a couple, do you ignore them? Do you be dragged by the challenge, or do you get out ahead of it? And I want to give the mayor a huge shout out, the county executive, the whole team, the commissioner, Kareem, the lieutenant governor, everybody associated with this. Words or phrases that have guided the actions over the past 6 weeks, an abundance of caution. Based on 3 data points, we all got together and went all in under the mayor's leadership on distributing bottled water. That's partly the answer to the question today. Why are we still have that outstanding? In an abundance of caution until the local assistance program is stood up. I think there is a very clear plan forward. I think we've been saying, all of us, for the past several weeks, until we have more data points, we're not equipped to articulate a plan. It's quite clear that there is a plan. In the immediate phase, we'll continue the bottled water for the time being. The local assistance programs will be set up ASAP with the city. Folks will be there to help install filters, to educate folks, including, as was mentioned by the mayor, on lead paint and lead flex, which is a far bigger contributor to kids' lead levels than even the water. As needed testing if folks are still not 100% certain. That's the short term, crystal clear. Medium term is the orthophosphate. Remember, there was a solution that was being flushed through Newark's pipes for 20 years, I believe, Mayor, right? And then for whatever reason, it stopped working. The early evidence is that this orthophosphate, which acts as a prophylactic on the inside of the lead pipes, early signs that that's flushing through, and then as Catherine said, by the spring, you're in a whole different place, that God willing, that will have coated these lead lines, and that's the medium term. And then finally, the long-term plan, thanks to Joe and the mayor and our help at the state level, but I give them a huge amount of credit, is replace the darn lines. So I think when folks out there hear 97%, in fact, it's 99 if you let it flush for 5 minutes or so, there's a short-term plan, there's a medium-term plan, and there's a long-term plan. I think, I'll speak for myself, I think that reinstills people's trust. Do you want anything, Mayor?
I had a question for the governor.
Do you want to, and he was asking you and me both. I don't know.
Yep.
No, this is back to Mark. Do you have anything to add on that?
I do. So I think, early on, we've been talking about messaging, and as a politician, when you say elected official, when you say messaging, people take that to mean you're trying to get around something or get over something. But I think what has happened here is that there have been too many messages that have been going into people's houses, from many different sources that have been conflicting, contradictory, some of it just flat out untrue. So it has caused a major level of confusion in our community, and people who have become anxious, fearful. The level of anxiety is raised, and I understand that. The use of our water has diminished to, we went down at least 10%, less use than it normally has. And so the only way to really deal with that is to keep pushing through it, continuing to talk to people, which is why we're having the event on the 2nd of October, continuing to talk to people, continue to be before people and give them the information. I find that when I go to places and I talk to people myself about what has happened, and myself and Kareem, and we navigate through all of the stuff that's going on, people in Newark are smart enough, are wise enough, are astute enough, are clear enough to decipher between what is helpful and what is not helpful, what is real to them and what is manufactured. They understand that. They always have understood that. And we don't need, and we've never needed anyone to come teach us how to figure out what's good for us or what's bad for us.
This is going to be a Charlie. We were going to cut it off, but just because of our personal affection for you, we're going to let you ask the question, which I hope influences the question.
You campaigned as a candidate on addressing lead, cleaning up the lead abatement, lead in the water. You mentioned it in your inaugural. And as you've cited several times, this is an extensive statewide problem. So what is your plan statewide, other than you just made a brief reference to $100 million that for bureaucratic maneuver will be freed up? But this is an extensive, I think your commissioner mentioned up to $3 billion. We've heard estimates that are much longer, much more extensive. So what is your plan, since you put this on the front burner before this crisis?
So the quick answer is this, Charlie. There are protocols in place across the state and communities. Newark was a good example of this. I always forget, was it silica? Silicate was being flushed through from 97 to 2017, as I recall, Kareem, right? And it gets tested regularly, and it was passing the 15 parts per billion, and then all of a sudden it didn't. So there are protocols, and there's a whole series of actions that are being taken, led by the mayor and with our support. There are a series of protocols in other communities around the state. It's yet to be determined. The bureaucratic maneuver, it may be bureaucratic maneuver, but it's real money. It's $100 million. And so it's yet to be determined how that's going to be deployed. But obviously, when you get readings that go above 15 parts per billion, we act. And these solutions, orthophosphate in the current reality in Newark, we are anticipating will work, and that will put us in a different place. Kareem, you want to add something, and then we're going to shut it down, I think.
I just want to say that the mayor has, the governor has created, since he's come in, he's created a lead task force. It's a bunch of us in here today that will be coming out with recommendations for the state, that we're going to, work with the state to implement some of these recommendations. And I'm also a part of that task force. There's a couple of other members in here, and those recommendations are something the governor did.
That's a very good point. I meant to say that. If there's any evidence, thank you, Kareem. If there's any evidence that the climate change isn't real, it's 88 degrees outside and it's 148 degrees in here. Thank you all, Mayor. Thank you for hosting us. Kareem, Catherine, Sheila, Joe. God bless you all.
And thanks so much for listening in with us as we've been watching the new announcement about the water quality in Newark, New Jersey, after what many feared would end up being a Flint-like lead crisis in New Jersey's largest city. Officials are saying that the EPA and the state DEP teamed up and they tested the water in more than 300 homes in Newark, New Jersey. That was 1,700 different water samples. And the governor said what they found is that 97% of the water filters were effective in removing lead from the water. 99% were effective in removing the lead after people let the water run, after they flushed it for about 5 minutes. But city officials, including the mayor, stressing that this is not a victory lap. And of course, that's especially true if you're in that 1% where the filters aren't working and flushing the system is not removing the lead from the water. So they also outlined what is next, including a long-term project, about 2 years to maybe 2.5 years, where they will replace every single lead service pipe in Newark, New Jersey. The mayor said that the city has taken a lot of blows during this in terms of accusations of mismanagement, especially when they started handing out bottled water. And it was discovered that a lot of that bottled water had expired. It had expiration dates that had already passed. He said the expiration date on bottled water doesn't matter. I think that a lot of people would beg to differ with that, but the bottom line here is that both city and state officials in New Jersey saying they will not be satisfied until every single lead service pipe in Newark, New Jersey is replaced. There's a lot of anxiety surrounding this, still a lot of mistrust, a lot of people saying, well, who's to say that the lead won't start trickling into my water? So to address some of those questions and anxieties, there will be a town hall meeting about the lead in the water in Newark, New Jersey on October 2nd. We're still trying to figure out exactly where and what time, but you can keep it here on CBSN New York for those details. And of course, as soon as we learn more, we'll put it on CBSNewYork.com. We will continue to follow this story on CBSN New York and on our website, and we'll be right back.